Aaron J. Anderson here. Gonna go over a video on why I chose the cameras that I have chosen. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going back to Panasonic because I love it. So instead of going back to the GH4, I went with the G7, and we're catching up here. Why I went with the G7 is because right off the bat, the 4K looked identical from what I've heard, and then after getting it from what I've seen. And it has better noise characteristics than the GH4, which I didn't like about the GH4. So no brainer for me to go with a 4K camera with better noise, and all the features that the G7 has, or all the features that I used in the GH4, the G7 had. Now there were some features in the GH4, but I never used them. I tried them out, but eventually I just go back to the basics, and the G7 had everything I needed, and it was less expensive, and I rather shoot with less expensive gear. I know that sounds kind of strange if the quality isn't going to change. Now, going from full frame to mirrorless, you can say, hey, dude, you've already, crushed your quality there. But I like Panasonic Lumix Micro Four Thirds mirrorless cameras. So within that realm, going from the G7 from the GH4, for me, was a no-brainer. I don't have to have insurance. If I dropped a camera or got stolen, I could buy one easier than I could another GH4. So G7 worked out fine, and I love the camera. To this day, I love it. Some people have said, why did you go with the GX8? Because you love the G7 so much. Because there was a lens that I've been wanting to use. I've said this in my last video, the Olympus 75mm f1.8. It's one of the sharpest lenses out there. It's a beautiful bokeh. The bokeh on the Olympus is much better than all the other lenses that I've had. I got the lens. So I got this camera because it has in-body stabilization, whereas the G7 did not, and the Olympus doesn't have image stabilization in the lens. So for the first time, I could actually have a camera and use that lens and have image stabilization. So when I was thinking about that, I was also thinking, what camera in the Panasonic Lumix lineup is the best quality, like the sensor or whatever, and that is the GX8, because it's a 20 megapixel sensor, and it just trumped all other sensors. And with the built-in stabilization with the Olympus lens on there, I have like a pain here. And so I was like, that's why I went with the GX8 opposed from the G7. Nothing wrong with the G7 except that one lens I wanted and image stabilization, and hey, 20 megapixel sensor opposed to 16 megapixel sensor. So that's why I got the GX8, which is a beautiful camera. Now, my birthday was just last month, and I told my wife I want a backup camera other than the G7 because I would want to use the Olympus lens on another body image stabilized camera. But then I said, let me look, because I want something smaller. I was dying to get a smaller camera actually right when I got the G7. I was hoping to get a smaller camera because I travel a lot. So the GX85 came out. I got it right there. And I was actually at B&H in New York like a day or two when this came out. And then when I picked it up and I felt the buttons, it was kind of cramped compared to my G7 and all the other cameras. Like, ooh, that might take a toll on me shooting for a while if this was going to be my A camera. And then when I put this camera up to my eye, I was immediately like, oh, it's like the Sony a6000. It's got this small, dinky little viewfinder, and when you put it up there, you kind of have to move your head around. I'm exaggerating a little bit here to find the view. And then you got all this just stray light coming in, and I was like, nah, I don't want it. And it didn't have articulating screen or a mic input, so I was like, I'll stick with my G7. Well, here I have this now. And why do I have it? Because of that Olympus lens. I had the Olympus lens for 2 days. Bad timing because I had to go to Florida, I think, or Georgia at the time I got it. And I wanted to compare that with my Panasonic 35 to 100 millimeter f2.8 and see, am I willing to give up the zoom, which I was a prime shooter for years, and I got the zoom, but I like the zoom. But I wasn't sure, and I wasn't going to make it back in time probably to return it, so I just returned it because I didn't want to get stuck with something I didn't like. So I returned it, but out of the tests, yeah, the bokeh is beautiful, and I love it. So that leaves me with now these two cameras here. The GX8, and I never had the G85, which is just like the G7, but with body stabilization. Comparing these two together, I had this for like 2 weeks. I did a couple pro photo shoots. I did a wedding with it. and a party, and I had both, and I was shooting with both using cameras like I do. When I got back, and for one, when I started shooting, I was at a party, so had my A camera, I had my battery grip and all that stuff on there, doing my shoots. And as I was shooting, I've already shot with this before and I loved it. My wife saw this one, and she got it for me, and she said, when I got it out, I said, hey, let me see that real quick. So I got this out because I wanted to do some tests during this party, this event, and she actually got it out of the bag. She looked at it and was like, hey, this doesn't look so, I forget what she said, but it didn't look as like, I mean, all these buttons on these and my other DSLRs, it looked simple to her, I guess. And she's actually a model of mine, and she's my assistant, so, but she's not a photographer. But she said, hey, do you mind if I shoot with this? I go, well, let me take a few shots, and sure, go, maybe she can bring back some shots that I didn't see. So she came back, and I started looking at the photos that she took, and they were decent. And I said, let me see that, because it looks actually really good. So I took some more photos, and I looked at it, and I was like, wow, this is actually, I didn't have this lens on it, by the way. I had the 20 millimeter on this, and on this one I had the 35 to 100 millimeter, and I'm shooting the zoomy stuff, and then when I need a wide shot, I pull out my my B cam to get the wide shots. But she was shooting with that 20 millimeter, and I was like, wow, that's good. So I started shooting with it, and I gave her mine. So I found out during this event that we weren't fighting over, but hey, give me that, here, you take this one. And I was starting to shoot with the GX85 more, which was weird because this is more comfortable to hold, not straight out of the box because I did some modifications to it, but after my mods and I had it's over there, my battery grip on, much more comfortable hold, but I just wanted to shoot with this because for being a small camera, it's actually nice to hold. And I think the problem with this was it was just a little big to where, I don't know, something weird about it. This one, even though it's small and it doesn't have that little finger rest that I did a mod on the GX8, it just felt good in my hands. I think because your whole hand's kind of around it so you can hold it easier. And I was just really liking it. And I was keeping aware, and I did a video on what's faster to film yourself, this type of a screen or a fully articulating screen with mic input and all that. You can check that out. Well, during this party event that I was getting paid for, remember, it's a paid job, so I was being cautious of what I'm using here. I was, doing my photos like this, not really loving this eyepiece at all, but when I would do a high shot, I would do a high shot like this of like the girls dancing and stuff, and I could see the screen. I never even flipped it out. A couple shots I was going around with my fisheye lens, and I would pull this out like this, doing low shots, and I didn't miss the articulating screen. I still love those, but I didn't miss it. So I like this. Now, I liked it so much that I'm probably going to get rid of this one. Lo and behold, I'm going to get rid of it, if that's the proper term to use at this point, over the GX85. Why? And why am I talking about all these cameras? Is because the 4K video in all the latest Panasonic cameras, the 4K video looks identical except better noise than the GH4. And they have all the features that I need and that I use, even in my professional work. The photography, they look the same. This is a 20 megapixel sensor, which is the king of the crop right now in the Panasonic Lumix world. But this is the 16 megapixel with the aliasing filter gone, which is supposed to give you 10% increase in quality. And when I went home and looked at the back of, well, not the back, but on my computer at the photos, they looked identical on the side-by-side shots, except every once in a while, certain photos would look more clear and better, and every time it was a GX85. So I'm like, wow, that's weird. Why is it actually looking better than this? Is it just the aliasing filter, or this has a new electronic, what's it called? The shutter is the electromagnetic shutter, which is softer, quieter, and all that. They said it eliminates 90% of shutter shock, and I knew that when I got it. This one is known to have shutter shock, and I even tested it. And I said I didn't find any shutter shock. But when I look at these back to back on the photos, I'm thinking, do I don't notice shutter shock in this because it like always has shutter shock? It just never gets worse. So when you're comparing itself by itself for shutter shock, maybe you don't notice shutter shock because all the photos have shutter shock, like minute shutter shock, to where it just doesn't look clear. You get what I'm getting at? Whereas this one is supposed to have 90% less shutter shock, and a lot of the photos were looking just more clear. Not necessarily more detail in essence. It's kind of weird to explain. So now I'm thinking maybe this always has shutter shock and this doesn't. And with the aliasing filter gone, it looks clear. Have no idea. Search that if you want. Long story short, image quality is the same, if not better, in my experience. I like the handling of this camera. There's a few mods I'm going to make about this, which I will go into later. And if I put this video out first, and which is going to make this a lot better. And that comes to the conclusion of the GH5. I was looking at the GH5. I heard all the hype about it, all the interviews, reviews, previews. I listened to a couple of the Japanese developers actually talking about it. And the GH5 has a new 20 megapixel sensor. This is the GX8. This has a 20 megapixel sensor. However, the one on the GH5 is newer, but when he asked, is it a higher resolution or better dynamic range than this one, he said no. The main goal, or the main reason why they made a new 20 megapixel sensor is to offload the data quicker. It's not, from what he was saying, it's not better quality than this, it's just offloading the data quicker, and that is for the 4K video at those higher codec bit rates. So, you know, the photos are going to look pretty similar probably to these two, except to the fact, only because this has the aliasing filter, this doesn't, so it kind of reaches to this level. So the GH5 is going to be 10% a little better than this because of the aliasing filter gone. So it's going to look a little better, but I don't think it's going to be like crazy. Like even comparing these, if you don't have them side by side zoomed in, you'll never notice the difference. So the GH5, I would assume, would be the same. Video's concerned, the higher bit depth, I just saw someone's review do all the different bit rates of the large files that the 4K can produce, and they don't find any difference. And I knew that because I've tried all the time different codecs and stuff, and sometimes you just don't notice a lot. Only in certain situations when you're color grading you might notice. So the GH5 for me, I don't know if I'll get it. Now, I've said I like the G7, then I like this, then I like that, and sure enough, I'll have the GH5, but that's a $2,000 camera. That's $1,400 more than this. For 10% increase in photo quality, I don't think is there, if that's true. And the codecs, I don't think I would use them because I'm completely happy using the codecs on these, even for professional use, for how I work. You guys might have clients that are expecting more or something. I don't, so it's great. So I think I'm going to stick with this, and I'm going to get rid of the GX8. I'm going to be flying with two of these. The cool thing about this is I was longing for this camera a long time ago till I felt it, and I didn't like it. But for me, for travel, look at this little thing. This is the 14 to 140 millimeter lens, which I was never going to get with the G7 or this because everybody says the shutter shock is like crazy on this. But with this 90% reduction in shutter shock, I didn't notice any shutter shock yet on this lens. And look at that small little package right there. I mean, that could fit in a little hip bag, and you've got a 14 to 140 millimeter or 28 to 280 millimeter lens on that little joy right there. And then you've got dual IS. I mean, it's amazing. So what am I going to do about the viewfinder, no mic input, and this? Well, I did a video on the no mic input in the screen, and you've seen how that worked out, where I wasn't bothered by this for those situations. As far as the eyepiece, stay tuned. I'm going to do some videos on some modifications that I'm going to do with this camera to make it build it up more for longer shoots, and then you can break it down for you know, what do you call it, traveling or hiking or something like that. So that's it, guys. I hope that answers some of your questions on why I left the G7 with the GX8, and now since I have this one, I thought I would throw in why I'm switching to two GX85s. Image stabilization, size, quality, the price. You can get these used for like $480 up to $680 with the lens. I mean, you could lose that, break it, or someone could steal it. You're not out a lot of money. So that's it, guys. But so far, I'm digging this. Anyways, Aaron J. Anderson, talk to you later. Bye-bye.